format for this meeting is a film speaker meeting for prison TV and inmate tablets to carry the message of hope and recovery to incarcerated Perryville prison inmates. Tonight, please help me welcome our special guest, Andrea.
Andrea Chiocca, drug addict. And Andrea. I'm going to try really hard not to swear for both your guys' sake and the recording. So my sobriety date is August 7th, 2013. I have a home group. It's called 7-Eleven. I have a sponsor. I have sponsees. God willing, there's grand sponsees. So I've just been doing the best of my ability to do what was told to me in the very beginning, and one of those things was show up, and the other one was put in the work, right? And lastly, carry the message to those still suffering. What it was like. I don't think I'm unique in any way. I think that the chaos and the madness of my addiction touches both men and women's lives. Started using drugs and alcohol about 12. And it was very rapid, very quickly for me. There was never that, the big book talks about the normal drinker that progresses to the hard drinker that progresses to the real alcoholic, and for me it was like the real alcoholic from the gate. And so as soon as I put a substance in my body at the age of 12, I just wanted more. It didn't matter what it was. If you had it, I was willing to try it, and if I liked it, I was probably going to do a lot more. And so at 14, I was introduced to meth. That was my first and foremost drug of choice from that day on. Around, I don't know, between 18 and 21, my family started to see problems with my addiction, and I obviously did not. And so at 21, naturally, I just started selling drugs, and that's what I did from 21 to 29. And I remember my mom and my brothers, they would they would go door to door looking for me between 18 and 21. And I remember sitting in there getting loaded and just being like, don't tell them I'm here. You know what I mean? And, that wouldn't be the case if I were just partying on the weekends. That was the case because I wasn't coming home for months at a time. And I wasn't sleeping. And so finally my mom decided that, maybe going to live with your father would be a good idea. And so I was born and raised in Phoenix. My mom moved to Utah trying to give us a better life, and she decided she was going to send me back to Phoenix. To me, it didn't matter as long as I could continue to get loaded, and I know from my brother's experience that Phoenix there's lots of choices to continue that lifestyle. So, and so that's what I did. I moved down here, started selling drugs. I sold drugs. I really didn't see a problem with it. I didn't, I would like to say that I thought that not sleeping for months, staying up for weeks at a time, sleeping for a day, and doing it again was normal behavior, or abnormal, but I was okay with it, and I was okay with my lifestyle, and I was okay with all the chaos. You know what I mean? And I honestly think that I fed off the chaos until 24. 24 years old, I got pregnant by a gentleman I had been in a relationship with, and we consciously made a decision as two meth addicts to conceive a child. And I literally you could not have convinced me that I was doing drugs because I had a problem. I was fully convinced that I was doing drugs because I chose to, up until that point. I wasn't quitting because I didn't want to. I wasn't hiding it because I didn't need to. I wasn't, I didn't need to go get a job because I was doing fine financially, which is all delusion. And then I got pregnant. And I remember, like, in the back of my mind thinking, like, well, you know, when you get pregnant, you'll stop, because that's what, like, normal healthy people do. They find out that they're pregnant and they stop drinking, right? But normal healthy people drink, like, a glass of wine at night. They don't do meth for weeks at a time. And got pregnant, and I couldn't stop. You know what I mean? I just, it wasn't even like I was trying to. That was the more concerning thing, right? Like, for whatever reason, continuing to get loaded seemed like the normal thing to do. And it absolutely was my life in that time. But I just remember thinking, like, so I would start to go to the doctor, and I would tell the doctor I was pregnant, that I was a drug addict, and, you know, I'm going to contribute that to God, because the doctor was really understanding. You know what I mean? And he was like, it's okay, just stop by the time you're 6 months old, the baby will be born fine, she won't have any issues, and CPS won't take your child from you. And I remember having just moments of, like, you know, why can't you stop? You know what I mean? Like, why can't you stop, dude? You're pregnant. But I would just continue to do what I do. And at 6 months pregnant, I went to get loaded one day, and I would love to say that that I made the conscious decision to do the right thing as a pregnant mother and stop at 6 months so that my child didn't get taken away, but that's not how it went down. How that went down was I went to get loaded, and I got so sick that I couldn't continue to get loaded. Like, it was physically incapable of continuing to get loaded. Like, it would just make me so ill. And today I fully understand that to be God, right? But at that time I was just like, okay, you know, you just can't get loaded. And so I had this beautiful baby girl. She was born on August 9th, 2005. And I was 3 months sober, and I'd never been sober since age 12. And it was a really weird time, right? Because those 3 months, it was like, I'm pregnant, I'm healthy, I'm happy, and, like, I knew I couldn't get loaded. I was just happy, man, and I had this little human, and she was, you know, starting to do somersaults in my belly, and it was great. And I had her that day, and her dad was still loaded, and he didn't show up to the hospital for, you know, quite a while. And so while I was sitting there holding that little girl, I made a whole bunch of promises that I meant to my core, right? And those promises were, I'm never going to get loaded again. I'm going to be a good mom to you. You know, if your dad's not on board, we're just going to live our life together. And, you know, and then that day was the first day that I started telling her she was the most beautifulest little girl in the whole wide world, and she could be whatever she wanted. And I go home, I'm breastfeeding her. I come to the conclusion that me and her father are never going to get along if one of us is loaded and the other one's not. And instead of kicking him out, I proceed to convince myself that that's sufficient reason enough for me to get loaded again. And I stopped breastfeeding. And I had committed some crimes while I was pregnant, because that's what I do. And the police showed up at my house one day, and I had a warrant, and that was the first time CPS got involved, and simply because I had a warrant, you know, and I flew through that CPS case, right? I knew how to pass those drug tests, and I knew how to tell them what they wanted, and I knew how to manipulate really well, and that I got that case closed. A few months later, my brother passed away on my daughter's first birthday, and he was my best friend, right? And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm loaded, I don't handle death well. I don't handle showing up well. I don't keep appointments. I'm not a good daughter. I'm not a good mother, although I like to convince myself that I am. I'm not a good sister. And so I kind of went into a downward spiral at that point. It got really progressive really quickly for me. I was already a really far advanced extreme drug addict, but when my brother passed away, it just got deeper. And so that was August 9th of 2006. By October of 2006, CPS was back at my door. And I had gotten in really deep. And so when they showed up that time, I just knew that my addiction had gone to a newer level than it was previously. And so when they showed up, I didn't lie this time, and I said, you know, I do have a drug problem and I need some help. I would be a liar if I didn't say that I still regret those words coming out of my mouth sometimes. But I think that was, you know, something bigger than me pushing those words out of my mouth. And so they said, okay, we're going to put you in treatment. We're going to take your daughter to family. In 10 days, we'll give her to you. And so this is the first time I've ever been sober and not pregnant. And my daughter's been taken away from me. And, you know, my brother just passed away, and I'm not saying that these are good reasons to get loaded, but this is what's going on in my head. And they put me in this treatment facility, and it's these Mormons, and they do these really weird chants in the morning, and it's really uncomfortable to me, and like I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin, and I asked them 4 days in, you know, when am I going to get my daughter? And they said, well, you said 10 days. And so I jumped the wall. I could have simply walked out the front door, but I walked to the back of the facility and I jumped the wall. And I walked from 28th Street in Pinshot all the way back to 15th Avenue Indian School and proceeded to get loaded. And I convinced myself that the reason I was leaving was because it was almost Christmas at this point, and I wanted to spend Christmas with my daughter. And that's absolutely what I believed, but the fact of the matter is I could not stand myself sober and losing my daughter. And so I proceeded to go get loaded. They put me in another treatment center. I left that one. They put me in another treatment center. I stayed for 30 days. It was doing really good. I thought I was going to get my daughter, but at this time I had become a flight risk because every treatment center they put me in, when I didn't get my daughter, I left. And so they said, you're not getting your daughter, dude, until you complete the program. And I walked out the front door of that one and got on the bus and went and did what I do. And so they sat me down one last time and they said, so backtrack. Every single facility told me, why are you getting sober? And every single time it was so I don't lose my daughter, right? And every counselor told me it has to be about you. And I would get so angry, right? Like, it has to be about my daughter. Because, like, at this point, I don't care about me. Like, the evidence of my lifestyle and the things I do and the harm I cause and the chaos that I bring to the world is all the evidence you need to know that I don't care about me at this point. And I just could not grasp that, man. And so they said, if we told you today that you were never going to get your daughter again, would you stay sober? And I said no. And they said, well, you're not going to get your daughter again. And I left. And I seen my daughter for the last time on June 6th of I seen my daughter for the last time on June 6th of 2009 in a McDonald's parking lot. And I wasn't allowed to tell her that that was the last time she was going to see me. And I sat there and I cried when they pulled away, and I went and got loaded. And by December 15th of 2009, I was on my way to a state paid vacation for 3 years. You know, and I believe that God sees around corners. What if I had kept my daughter and kept getting loaded and kept selling drugs, right? And I can wrap my head around that today, fully. I can wrap my head around that today. But, you know, what if something would have happened to her? And I went to DOC, and I was on Long Lane 26 yard for the majority of my stay because I'm really hard-headed and I don't like to follow rules. And so the first year I was in, it was just chaos in here, man. It was just, I'm such a piece of crap, like I'm such a horrible mother, like you deserve to be where you are, you know what I mean? And then it was taking other people's pills, doing heroin that hit the yard, whatever the case may be. If you told me that it was gonna help me sleep or help me not be in my headspace in that 2-man cell for 23 hours a day, then I was willing to give it a shot. And before I had seen my daughter the last time, I had incorporated heroin into my many drugs of choice at that time. And so around March of 2011, I did some heroin, and I just didn't want to stay in prison any longer than I had to. You know what I mean? Like, I just did not want to drop a dirty UA and stay in prison any longer than necessary. And so I convinced myself in that moment, that day, that I told my friend that I don't want anymore, please don't offer it to me, that I had gained the power of choice. It's a really dangerous place to be for real drug addicts and alcoholics, right? And so I was a month away from maxing out, and they came to me and they said, hey, we'll let you out a month early if you go to a treatment facility. And so, like, in my mind, it's like we're chanting, and I'm just really not down for that, right? And then they said, well, it's a co-ed facility. I was like, well, okay. You probably shouldn't offer women in prison co-ed facilities, but it was on the table, and I accepted, and so I went, and I walked around and I talked a lot about how good God was, but I had no God. I sat in meetings like the back row, right, just like that angry girl that just got out of prison, and I was really good at socializing, but you want to talk about the steps, and that's a whole nother story. And then you want to talk about the 4-step, and that's a real touchy situation for me. And when I sat down to do my intake that day, it was August 2nd. I obviously don't follow rules. I was supposed to check in on the 1st from prison. I checked in on the 2nd. So that's how I started that journey. And she sat me down and she said, what's your sobriety date? And I looked at her and I said, December 15th, 2009. And she just looked at me like, are you serious? And I was offended. Like, how dare you question my sobriety date? And that was a lie, right? Because I had taken other people's trazodone, and I had taken people's gabapentin, and I had, you know what I mean, for the first year and a half that I was in there. Like, if you had it, I was willing to do it. And she just said, it's your sobriety date. Start your program how you want. And God bless that woman, because I understood a few months later why she said that. And so I fraternized. I got pregnant by a gentleman I was fraternizing with. I was terrified I was going to lose another kid to CPS. I kept that a secret, right? Because why wouldn't I? I'm not calling my sponsor every day. I'm not doing the step work. I trust nobody. I'm still super, super sick. Like, I'm going back and collecting old debts to pay my rent at the halfway house. Like, I'm just barely hanging on by a thread, and I don't even realize it. And so I get this great job at CBI, and in the same time I find out I'm pregnant, and at the same time I get kicked out for being late for curfew when I was actually fraternizing. And I moved into the budget suites, because that's what we did, right? I don't know about you guys, but that's what I did. And so I move into the budget suites. I'm still sober by the grace of God. My friend convinces me that I should move into this 3-quarter house because, like, nobody's there, the management isn't around. And then I'm out of the budget suites, and I'm like, okay, cool. And within a month, I'm smoking dope in the walk-in closet, right? And it just happened like that quick. And the Big Book talks about having no mental defense against the first use. And I have no mental defense because I've done absolutely nothing that's been shown to me to have the power of making the right decision when presented it, right? Nothing. I've done nothing. I've talked about how amazing God is, but I have no God. That's the only thing I'm doing, and I'm showing up at meetings to get my slip signed so that I don't get kicked out. And so I'm working at CBI. I feel like a hypocrite. I'm loaded. I'm telling other patients that they can get their lives together, that there's hope for them. I promise you guys I'm not loaded right now. That there's hope for them. And you know what I mean? And I'm just like, I'm dying inside, right? Like in a way that I haven't died inside before, right? Because externally, outside of not having my daughter, my life looks more amazing than it ever has my whole life. But I'm smoking dope in the walk-in closet. And that goes on for 5 months. I'm dating a man who, I don't know if I'm lucky or him, but he's now my husband, who's also new to recovery, and he moves in because I convinced the 3/4 house owner that we need to have guys there because I'm really manipulative when I'm high. And I'm convinced because we're arguing that he's getting loaded and just not telling me. And so selfishly, I'm like, well, if I just bring it up, then we can just get loaded together and we could stop fighting. Because that has to be what's going on. And so I sit him down, and so this is what happened. I sit him down and I asked him, I said, hey, I need to ask you something, I'll never forget it. He was sitting up against the wall, he was sitting on my bed. He said, yeah, what is it? And I said, have you gotten high since we started seeing each other? And he's the only person that knows about my abortion. So like, he's the only person I've been honest with probably my whole life. And he says, no, why? And it just came out. Because I have. And I'm a really selfish person, right? The big book also talks about selfish self-centeredness. And so he looks at me, and God bless him, he says, well, what do you want to do about it? He doesn't scream at me. I mean, I can see the disappointment, but like, he has enough program that he's like, okay, dude, she's sick. Like, what do we need to do to get better? And I'm like, well, I can't get sober right now. I have to go to work. Like, I got somewhere to be. And he, we have a little disagreement about that. He goes out in the living room. I proceed to walk out the door, go meet my dope man, come back and get high and walk in the closet with him sitting in the living room. There's no doubt in my mind that he knows, right? And like, that's how selfish I am when I'm loaded. I don't care about his recovery. I don't care about the other 7 people that live there's recovery. All I care about is making sure that I'm okay to do the next thing that I need to do, whatever that is. So 2 weeks goes by of this. And we get in this knockdown, drag-out argument, man, and I'm screaming at him. I don't know about you guys, but when you talk about getting sober, to me, there's a lot of fears, right? And those fears look like not having no place to live. Those fears look like losing my job. Those fears look like having to tell people that I've been getting loaded and lying to them. Those fears look like being alone and ending up homeless again. Those fears, for me, ultimately look like I'm going to end up back in prison. And he looked at me and he said, you have no effing faith, and until you get honest, you're not going to get sober. And something broke. Like, I knew that he was telling me the truth. And so I walked around, I started knocking on doors, I started telling everybody in the 3/4 house that I'd been getting loaded in the walk-in closet, that I wasn't the senior house attendee that they all thought that I was. And I started making phone calls, and I called my mom in Utah, and I cried to her, and I said, I've been lying to you for the last year, I've been loaded. And she was heartbroken. You know what I mean? And I got down on my knees in that walk-in closet that I had just gotten loaded in the day before. It was August 6th, and I said a prayer to God that I had no understanding of, and it sounded like this. Look, God, I don't know if you're there, but if you help me out, I'll do what these people tell me to. And those people were the people of AA, CMA, CA, HA, because I qualify for them well, right? And I got a sponsor, and I did everything she told me to. And let me tell you, I am the most begrudging, judgmental sponsee you will ever meet. Because you tell me to write it, and I'm like, well, I'll write it, but this is stupid. You know what I mean? And then every time I would write it and we would discuss it, I would have a little bit more freedom. And then I would write that 4-step, and I wrote down that graves list, and I said all the things I swore I was never going to tell anybody about myself. And we talked about it, and she said she understood. And she didn't judge me. And I could tell in her tone and her facial expressions that like she got it, right? And that I wasn't a piece of crap. That I was a drug addict that had no power of choice of whether or not I got loaded. And that as a drug addict, I don't care about anybody but me, right? And I did everything she told me to. She told me to make some amends. I shared one before, I made some amends. I called that guy whose child I had aborted against his will, and I said, hey, you know, I owe you an amends. Selfish, self-centered, completely inconsiderate of your feelings. He said, look, dude, keep doing what you're doing, but I can't forgive you. And I was like, okay. You know what I mean? And I remember, it's interesting how much the process, right? Each step prepares you for the next. And I remember that in doing step 8 and thoroughly reviewing how I had harmed others, right? And like really wrapping my head around that I was okay with the fact that he didn't forgive me. Like he was entitled not to forgive me. Just because I'm sober today doesn't mean he needs to say, it's cool, dude. You didn't hurt me. You know, and I did the things, and I started getting sponsees, and she said get 15, and I was like, I think I need a new sponsor. and you know, we left on good terms. I got a new sponsor. I've had the same sponsor for years. And that sponsor, the first sponsor, I will forever be grateful for. And my new sponsor after her has taught me a level of humanness that I don't think I would have ever grasp, right? Because I remember I wrote down my 6th step, right? So your sponsor, I don't know if you guys have gotten to your 4th step, but it's going to be fun on that 5th step. They're going to slide a little piece of paper across the table to you, and you're going to hate your sponsor for about 20 minutes afterwards, because it's going to say things like delusional, dishonest, selfish, right? And so then there's the 7th step, and it says, you know, we pray to our Creator, we ask them to remove our shortcomings, our defects. And so I was really, really upset like 3 years later when I still had these defects cropping up. And so, because I was like, man, I said that prayer, right? Like I wrote them out. And I found out that, you know, that there's a payoff and a cost to my defects. And while it's serving me a purpose, I'm going to continue, sober or not, to participate in that defect. And so that was free, right? 3 years later. 3 years later to find out that I'm still not a piece of crap. I just got some more work to do. And so my life today, it's always really short because I cannot truly put into words for you guys what that's like today, right? I have an amazing husband. I get to show up as a daughter. I get to be a sister to my brother who's still in addiction when he allows me to be. And I get to not hold grudges about that, right? Like I get it to my core that he's not thinking of me, you know, and it's not personal. I have a job. I pay taxes. Like, that's really weird. Literally no job from 18 to 33. So that's really mind-boggling to me. I have a bonus son with my husband that I get to be a bonus mom to. I get to look at myself in the mirror and know that that God has got my daughter, and that I might not ever see her again. But the last thing I want to do is not be sober if she does come looking, right? And so because of that, I try, and I fail utterly, to do this to the best of my ability. I got my rights restored on February 3rd. And for those of you that are in prison, that's a big deal. You know what I mean? Like, I can legally own a gun. I can legally vote. When you run my background now, it doesn't say that I am a 3-time felon. Dude, I cried when I read those papers. You know what I mean? Like, I was convinced to my core from a very young age that I was going to die in addiction. There was only 2 things that I was positive of. I had no goals in life. None. I was positive that I was going to die from my addiction and that I would eventually end up in prison. I just knew those two things were going to happen. And that's not my story today. And if I continue to do this, it doesn't ever have to be, but I am absolutely in tune with the fact that I will forever be a drug addict. And that it's not going to go away. And that if I decide to go have a glass of wine with dinner, it might work out for a little while, but eventually I'm going to be sticking needles in my neck again. Crying in hot bathtubs because I can't find a vein. Living on the streets. Losing everything that matters to me. And probably either death or prison, right? Because we don't have a lot of options if I don't go crazy. I don't know, and this program has changed my life. I didn't expect it to. I watched a lot of people come in and do like we're doing now and bring meetings, and I would watch their happiness, and like, you know, they would pull up in like cars that weren't stolen, and you know, and I was just like mind boggled by that, right? But it changed my life, and the only thing that makes me different from the person that is still suffering is the opportunity to do the work, right? And the willingness. So I was not convinced that I was a drug addict, alcoholic, and that I couldn't stop on my own. And when I finally came to terms with that, the rest of it was kind of a breeze, man. Because you know that you're going to die if you don't find a solution. And so, I don't know, I'm super grateful to be here, and with that I'll pass.